Hey everyone, I'm Sean Healy and my business is Dragon Koi Coaching. Today I wanted to answer a question that actually came up on our business forum yesterday, and I think it's a really good one. Diana Emmerich asked the question, and she asked, how do movement professionals find their seed or startup money for their studios or businesses? Really great question. This is an interesting one because as all of us, I'll go back to my situation when I first started up. I had none of my own money. If you want to know the truth, I think I maybe had $1,000 or something like that. So, there's different ways. When I went through my process, I wrote my business plan. I figured out all the numbers. I thought I figured out all the numbers, and went to the bank. The challenge is from a banking perspective. They really don't like to give you money unless you've proven yourself. So, Diana, I think that you have a studio in your home and you want to transition into more of a brick and mortar, kind of a commercial space. That helps because you have history, right? When I was starting, I had history because I went to people's homes and did personal training and stuff like that. But what I needed, I started with about $95,000, and they didn't want to take the risk. It was just too risky for them, which I get, The challenge with this process is that, you go through your due diligence, you write your business plan, you take it to the bank, and they work through the numbers, tear it apart, look at it for probably, it was like 6 weeks when I went through my process, and it just, they in the beginning said, yeah, it's going to be, I think this will be great. And then all of a sudden, they come back and it's like, sorry, we can't do this. It's like, okay, well, you could have told me that 6 weeks ago. So that being said, I think that there's a couple ways that people usually get startup money. And I'm going to take this from a Pilates studio perspective again. And it doesn't matter if it's Pilates or yoga or physical therapy or chiropractic or anything else. At the end of the day, you have certain expenses, right? You have to get equipment, potentially. If you're starting in your home, are you going to transition into a studio that's similar size, so you really don't have a whole lot of expense to start up from a equipment purchase perspective? Or are you going to go into 1,000 or 2,000, 3,000 square foot facility and want to have classes of some kind, let's say reformer classes, where you need to have 4, 5, 6, 10 reformers? When we opened up our second studio, we had about $50,000 worth of equipment that we had to buy. So there's a couple things that I would say. There's a couple ways to do this. One is, it's going to cost you some money to start up. That's kind of a dumb statement, but it's true. And there's things that we don't think about, you think about the lease, but you have first, last, and deposit, right? So that could be easily a $5,000 to $10,000 hit in the beginning, depending on the size of the studio. You have things like signage and permitting and stuff like that. Like in Sedona, they have this, I think, sort of a dumb little law that is, we have to have a change of use permit, right? If I came into this studio and it was a studio before, it doesn't matter. I still have to pay them money for a change of use permit. When we opened this studio here, there wasn't anything prior to us. There wasn't anything in it. We still had to have a change of use. So it's, there's certain things that are kind of local government bodies getting their piece of the cut. From a signage perspective, it can totally range. And in Oregon, when we were there, as long as it was under 35 square feet, we didn't have to pay for anything or permit it or anything. Here, if you have a cardboard cutout on the sidewalk, you have to permit it. So there's those little things that nickel and dime you that you kind of forget about. There's also those little things like decorations. You can have all your equipment, but you got to make your studio look nice, and those things just nickel and dime you. So how do you get that money, right? One is make sure you know how much you need. When I started my business, like I said, I went through my business plan and I wrote out the whole thing. And what I did is I got private money, private lending money. And that's actually how a lot of people start small businesses in the beginning until they establish relationships with a bank. I had 2 lenders. I borrowed $95,000. And when I opened the doors, I had about $3,000 in the bank. That was my first mistake. you need to have operating expense. Cash is king, no matter what. I mean, if you're not making enough money or you don't have enough money, and you're not going to be making enough money in the beginning, more than likely to be able to cover your expenses, you got to have a little bit of reserve for sure. Even running a good business, I mean, I think that in a perfect world, you should have 6 months in the bank, but much easier said than done. That being said, you can go. Usually, you're going to find money from a private source, more than likely. You hear people starting their studios on a credit card. If they have a credit card that has $10,000 on it, they figure it out somehow and get everything that they need, and it works. Things I would look at is, what is your clientele like? What is that support on the front end going to be like when you open your doors? Are you going to be able to make the money that you need to make to pay your bills? If you can't, which most people can't in the beginning, they just don't have the volume, you have to have reserve, because people are going to still want to get paid. So private money is usually where we come from. A lot of times, family money, which is fine, but it's very slick. It's tough to be in that situation. It's sort of that partnership, and business partnerships are very, very difficult, which we can talk about at a different time, because everybody has their own ideas. As long as you're paying back whoever you borrowed the money from, then great, but it's always not as easy as it seems. So, the answer to this one is not necessarily easy. Obviously, the first line of defense is going to a bank. More than likely, they're going to turn you down unless you have some sort of a relationship with them, or get a second on your house and use that money, or have something as collateral. They're going to want something as collateral, and realistically, the equipment that you have is really not worth the collateral that they want. The second level which is where I went, is to find people that are private investors. You're probably going to pay a bit of a higher interest potentially. But it's an option, and it works well for most people, And then look at getting as profitable as fast as you can and saving money. Run lean. If you can run lean and you can figure out how to store those nuts away for the future, that's going to be important, because at some point you're going to have a downturn. It just is part of the game. I mean, weird things happen. Can be weather, can be construction, can be all kinds of stuff where people decide that they can't come in right now, and you're not making the money, and cash flow isn't as good. So, Diana, there's really no real simple answer to this. Save money and have, if you were to be able to get lucky enough to go to a bank and be able to get an SBA loan or something like that, which is possible, they're going to want you to have your skin in the game too. So, they're probably going to want at least 20%. SBA is a really good option. There's usually chapters through local community colleges or the chamber or something in a lot of communities that they have programs that you can find out about all that stuff. I would highly recommend going to look at that. It's one of the ways that a lot of new startup businesses get money. I mean, it's part of our economy. We want small businesses to work. The challenge is that small businesses are risky. We are. I mean, most of us get into this because we're passionate and have a technique that we understand and think we're going to change the world and know nothing about business, which is part of the reason that we're having, a forum here to be able to help people with that challenge, So great question, Diana. I think that I don't know if I gave you a very good answer with this, but sometimes there's really not a good answer. It's basically where can you get the money from, and you can find it. The other thing that I would say is, let's say you have to buy equipment. You can get into a studio relatively inexpensively. Even like with our second studio where we had $50,000 worth of equipment, we leased it all. It's a lease to own, right? So we could get in almost with no expense in terms of equipment, and pay it off over a few years. I mean, it's a loan, right? It's a lease. So it worked for us, and we had $50,000 worth of equipment. That being said, you still got that day to day. You got to be able to pay the bill, right? again, a little vague with the answer, but number one, top where people look first is banks. Number two is private lenders. A lot of times private lenders, we go to family. There's always people that are willing to give money. You can find the money. It's just that how much do you want to spend, and what kind of an interest do you want? I have a friend that invests in real estate, and he's borrowed millions from private lenders to be able to get it to the point where he can get what he wants and then transfer it to a conventional loan. So there's always people out there that will share their money with you. They're just going to want something in return. So just got to make sure you can stand up to that, whatever it is in return. Anyway, let me know if you have other questions about this. I think that this is a really good question. It's where everybody has to start. We got to figure out how to fund it somehow. And I would say, start lean. Don't go big yet, because that's a big nut to crack. Firsthand, I know this. I mean, when you get big, it gets tough. It can get tough. It also can make a lot more too. So, anyway, great question. Let me know if you have questions about this. Additional questions. And if you have suggestions on this, if you have a path that you've gone down and can make recommendations, that's awesome. That'd be great to hear. But I think that there's a lot of different ways to crack this nut, so to speak. It's just you gotta find the right one, and you have to be comfortable with it. You have to be able to know that at the end of the day, everybody just wants their money. From a lending perspective, if you can save your money and do it and fund it yourself, way better. You're not under the gun for it then. So that would be my first recommendation. That just takes a little longer and it's a little bit harder. And for a lot of us, me included, in the beginning of this whole thing, I wanted to find a different way. I wanted to get going on it because I was excited about it. So anyway, let me know if you have questions, comments below, suggestions below. That's awesome. If you have other ideas and creative ways of doing this, that's great. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome rest of your week, and I'll see you on the flip side.